The kingdom of Gobletopia was in a right state. This was because their most prized possession, the Goblet of Gumption, had been nicked. It was said to be crafted from a dwarf's toenail and a dragon's sneeze. It could turn water into wine. Well, more like lukewarm squash, really. King Bartholomew the Befuddled was, as you might expect, befuddled. He paced up and down, wrung his hands, and even tried to stand on his head. "We need heroes," he wailed, "but all our heroes are busy." The queen, a sensible woman named Brenda, sighed. "Darling, we'll have to make do with what we've got." What they had was a motley crew of misfits. They were about as much use as a chocolate teapot. The news of the theft spread like wildfire through the kingdom. It reached the ears of a timid knight, Sir Cedric the Slightly Scared, who was currently hiding under a table. He was terrified of a spider. With a trembling hand, he picked up his rubber sword. Next up was Mildred the Magnificent, a wizard who couldn't tell her spells from her elbow. Her most impressive trick was turning her beard blue, accidentally of course. Then there was Bob. Just Bob. No fancy title. He was a rogue. A terrible rogue, truth be told. He couldn't pickpocket a handkerchief from a one-armed man, but he did have a rather nice line in limericks. And finally, there was the Bard. He insisted on being called the Rhymer, which wasn't very original. He had a rhyme for every occasion. The queen ushered this ragtag bunch into the royal court. They looked about as out of place as a penguin in a sauna.
"Brave heroes, the fate of Gobletopia rests in your capable hands."
Sir Cedric trembled. Mildred sneezed, setting her hat on fire. Bob tried to look heroic, but tripped over his own feet. The Rhymer burst into song.
"A goblet is gone, oh the shame! To retrieve it we must play the game. With courage and might we'll set things aright, and bring back the goblet with nary a blame."
The queen pinched the bridge of her nose. This was going to be a long quest. Their first port of call was to consult with the kingdom's oracle, a wizened old gnome named Agnes. Agnes lived in a mushroom, which was pretty standard for an oracle, apparently. She spoke in riddles, which was less standard and a lot more annoying.
"To find the goblet, you must follow the path of the jiggling jelly. Beware the giggle of geese and the wrath of the wobbly weasel."
Right, that's cleared that up then.
Even Mildred, who was used to magical mumbo-jumbo, looked baffled. They left the mushroom none the wiser.
Well, that was helpful.
"Fear not, brave comrades. A jiggling jelly, a clue it must be, to a place where such jiggling is easy to see."
They spent the next few hours wandering aimlessly, looking for anything that even remotely resembled a jiggling jelly. They found a baker selling jam tarts, but that wasn't quite right. They even considered asking a particularly rotund merchant if he knew how to jiggle, but thought better of it.
This is hopeless.
The swamp of sogginess was exactly as advertised. It was soggy, very soggy, and it smelled like wet socks and old cabbage.
Charming.
This is a disaster. We'll be eaten alive by giant mosquitoes.
At least they'll have something to nibble on.
Bob quipped, nodding towards Cedric's rather plump posterior. Cedric squeaked in indignation. They slogged through the swamp, their boots making squelching noises. The air was thick with the sound of croaking frogs and the occasional chirp of a bird.
Beware the giggle of geese.
What are the chances of running into geese in a swamp?
As if on cue, a flock of geese descended upon them, honking and flapping their wings.
Not geese. Geese that giggle.
The geese did, in fact, giggle. It was a high-pitched, slightly demented giggle that sent shivers down their spines.
Make them stop!
I can't understand a word they're saying. They're speaking in French. Or maybe goosish. I didn't pay attention in that lesson.
The only one who seemed unfazed was the Rhymer, who was calmly composing a new verse about the giggling geese.
Quick thinking, Rhymer. Distract them with your awful poetry.
The Rhymer struck a pose and began to recite his latest masterpiece.
"Oh, giggling geese with feathers so fine, your laughter is strange, it's almost divine."
The geese paused, momentarily mesmerized by the sheer awfulness of the poem. They finally escaped the swamp covered in mud and goose tears.
Right, where next?
According to the oracle, we need to beware the wrath of the wobbly weasel.
That's not ominous at all.
They journeyed onwards, their spirits dampened by the encounter with the geese and the prospect of facing a wobbly weasel. They stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. In the center was a sight that made them stop in their tracks. Goblins, hundreds of them. They were having a massive party. There was music, dancing, and a whole roasted ox on a spit. And in the middle of it all, perched precariously on a stack of barrels, was the Goblet of Gumption.
Bingo!
The goblins, however, were not so keen on sharing. They spotted our heroes and let out a ferocious battle cry.
They look cross.
Right. Plan of attack. Cedric, you distract them with your swordsmanship. Bob, you sneak in and grab the goblet. Reimer, well, just try not to make things worse.
Cedric charged into the fray, waving his rubber sword with surprising ferocity. It wasn't very effective, but it did make a rather satisfying squeaking noise. Bob, meanwhile, tried to blend in with the crowd. He pulled a pointy hat over his head and began hopping up and down, shouting, "What's up, my goblin brethren?"
Goblins dance and goblins prance, but they've stolen our goblet, it's time to advance. With a flick and a flare, we'll show them we care and retrieve our dear goblet and give them a glance.
The goblins, however, were not impressed. One particularly large goblin, who looked like he hadn't skipped many meals, grabbed the goblet and took a swig. Then, something strange happened. The goblet began to shake. It sprouted legs. Chicken legs, to be precise. And with a squawk and a flurry of feathers, it ran off into the forest.
Did that just happen?
It appears the Goblet of Gumption has a mind of its own, and a penchant for poultry-like appendages.
Well, this is just great. Now we have to chase a runaway chalice with a chicken fetish. And so began the most bizarre chase in the history of Gobletopia. They pursued the chicken-legged chalice through fields, over hills, and even across a rather rickety bridge.
This is ridiculous!
Speak for yourself. I haven't had this much exercise since that time I ran from the baker after stealing those pies.
You stole pies?
Allegedly.
But even Bob's impressive lack of fitness couldn't compete with a goblet that could run like a chicken on a sugar rush. They were losing it fast. Just when they were about to give up hope, they came across a clearing in the woods. In the middle of the clearing stood a solitary figure. It was a chicken. A very old, very wise-looking chicken.
Don't tell me. We have to ask the chicken for directions.
The chicken fixed them with a beady stare.
I believe you seek the Goblet of Gumption.
Amazing deduction, Sherlock.
To catch the goblet, you must solve my riddle.
Here we go again.
I have a comb, but I cannot style. I have a waddle, but I cannot smile. I have wings, but I cannot fly. I lay treasures, but I never cry. What am I?
A riddle? Really? At a time like this?
Think, my friends, think. It must have something to do with the goblet.
They racked their brains trying to decipher the cryptic clues.
A creature of mystery, a feathered delight with a riddle to solve day or night. It lays treasures, you see, but what could it be? I haven't a clue, try as I might.
The chicken sighed.
Honestly, poets.
They spent what felt like hours pondering the riddle. Cedric paced back and forth, muttering about combs and waddles. Mildred tried to conjure up a spell that would make the answer appear, but the only thing that appeared was a rather disgruntled-looking rabbit. Bob, meanwhile, had wandered off and was attempting to barter with a squirrel for its nuts.
Bob, focus.
I am focusing. On these nuts, they look delicious.
The Reimer, meanwhile, was still trying to craft the perfect rhyme. Just then, Mildred had an epiphany.
Of course. The answer is right in front of us.
She pointed to a nearby object. It was a simple wooden chicken coop.
The riddle said it lays treasures. What lays treasures in a chicken coop?
An egg?
Exactly, the answer to the riddle is an egg.
The chicken nodded sagely.
Well done. You have solved my riddle.
As if on cue, the chicken coop began to shake. The door burst open and out popped the Goblet of Gumption, still sporting its chicken legs. It waddled over to the heroes and stopped at their feet, looking decidedly sheepish.
Well, that was easy.
They returned to the castle, victorious and slightly mud-splattered. The king, overjoyed to have his precious Goblet of Gumption back, declared a national holiday in their honor. Sir Cedric the Slightly Scared was knighted, again, this time with a slightly less rubbery sword. Mildred the Magnificent was showered with praise and requests for magic shows. She politely declined, fearing she might turn the entire court into toads. Bob, much to everyone's surprise, was hailed as a hero. He used this newfound fame to try and sell his limericks at exorbitant prices. His success rate was limited. And the Reimer? Well, he continued to rhyme, of course. In fact, he composed an epic ballad about their adventures. It was terrible, but at least it rhymed. They returned to the castle, victorious and slightly mud-splattered. The king, overjoyed to have his precious Goblet of Gumption back, declared a national holiday in their honor. Sir Cedric the Slightly Scared was knighted. Again, this time with a slightly less rubbery sword. Mildred the Magnificent was showered with praise and requests for magic shows. She politely declined, fearing she might turn the entire court into toads. Bob, much to everyone's surprise, was hailed as a hero. He used this newfound fame to try and sell his limericks at exorbitant prices. His success rate was limited. And the rhymer? Well, he continued to rhyme, of course. In fact, he composed an epic ballad about their adventures. It was terrible, but at least it rhymed. As for the Goblet of Gumption, well, it was last seen doing the chicken dance in the royal kitchens. Some things never change.